Kingkiller Chronicle saga. So what is occurring? Well, essentially, Patrick Rothfuss, a very famous or infamous author, depending on your point of view, has for a long time been working on a certain fantasy series, and it's been taking him a long time to complete it. Again, I don't really judge Patrick by that. His books are very strange. I've only skimmed them because they are very weird and unusual. I'm not going to go into detail about the saga itself. This is a sort of external controversy on what he promised fans. Rothfuss does a lot of good things, including charity, and he's actually broken a few records on that front. However, it's a bit of a mixed bag, and I want to be fair to both sides. Essentially, Patrick promised a preview of his work. To some degree, he did fulfill his promise. For instance, he promised if they met a certain goal on his charity, that they would get access to a prologue for the new book, and that was accomplished, and he read out the prologue. It turns out to be a little bit of a fake prize because a lot of the prologue, we already know this. It just repeated what we already knew. However, there were a few tidbits that were very juicy, and those were new. So it was a bit of a mixed bag, but it was solid. And then for another charity, he decided to make a challenge that if a certain goal was accomplished, and it exceeded $1 million, that he would share a full chapter. It wouldn't spoil too much of the plot, but it would be a full chapter from the upcoming book. And the goal was met, but no chapter is forthcoming. So we're going to listen to a very angry fan who is very loyal, but somewhat mixed on Rothfuss not fulfilling his promise.
Time. So I like to think that he does have a good chunk of the third book written, but yeah, it can be very difficult being a Kingkiller fan, even more so than being a Song of Ice and Fire fan, because George R.R. Martin has at least a ton of projects that he's worked on. He has other books that he's written and other things going on in his franchise. But with Rothfuss, we've really just had a slow regard of silent things as far as like spin-offs. Like I said, I believe this is going to affect his charity. That's why there probably wasn't a fundraiser in 2022. So maybe he will end up releasing the chapter later this year so that he can do another fundraiser this year. And because there really hasn't been any official apology as of yet, I could see that maybe he'll just kind of sweep it under the rug and do his usual pattern of avoidance, and maybe he'll just mention in a stream one time that he's also disappointed in himself for not getting it out there. And you know, in some ways I can relate to getting overwhelmed by stress and then trying to just avoid something. I've done that in the
Again, no one here is trying to cancel Rothfuss. We understand these books are very hard, they take time. Believe me, having written one fantasy novel and I need to go back to re-edit it, it is no small undertaking to do a very serious, good fantasy work. So him taking, well, a very long time, George R.R. Martin style, to give us more of the Kingkiller saga, that's fine. I have no issue with that. But again, he did make a promise. The goal was met, and we still don't have a chapter. It's a little disappointing. And as this video points out, there's a bit of self-interest because it's not total altruism. Apparently he does pay himself for the charity. He apparently rents out a headquarters for about $80,000. Again, it's not a scam. The money is going to charity, and a lot of it is doing vital work. However, he is benefiting technically from the fans subsidizing him doing charity work, which is basically kind of form of income for him. But again, for the most part, he's active with the fandom. He's very responsive. He's very respectful. But now occasionally he does block people who keep asking him nasty questions about this and when the book is coming out. And apparently the book is officially coming to us in a few months. Anything could happen, so it could be delayed. So it might seem like a pointless controversy. We're going to get the book anyway. Still, a promise was made, and given that the fans did devote all this time and energy and money to the charity, it just seems only right he tries to fulfill the promise. It's been a while, and the clock is running, but I hope Rothfuss does the right thing. Again, I don't have any issues with his honor. I think overall he's been a pretty straightforward person. But again, people have waited for these books for a long time. We're coming on the anniversary of these books, and it is insane. And on a final note, if you do want to get into the books, I will forewarn you, they are not typical fantasy books. These are very unique books, even within fantasy. There's no nice way of putting it. Very boring. He's trying to give us fantasy in real time. So in other words, the amount of time it takes for things to happen is how they would happen in the real world, which means nothing will happen. So these are not books meant to have the quote formula of action, then dialogue, then action. That's just not the way the saga works. So if you are going to get into it, it's a very unique take on the fantasy genre, and it's got a huge fan base, but it's not for everyone. Fair warning if you want to jump on board the Patrick Rothfuss fandom.